Hello, my name is Juan Martin. This is for course Keen 302. This is my critical assignment based on osteoporosis. So osteoporosis is a disease characterized by low bone density and structural deterioration of bone density, which leads to fragile and weak bones being highly susceptible to bone fractures. Osteoblasts and osteoclasts are cells that we have, one of them which is bone forming cells, and the other one is bone resorbing cells, which basically breaks down bone. This is something that takes place daily. Every day we build new bone and break down bone. Now as we age, it's a little more difficult for our bodies to build new bone, for osteoblasts to be working. Now people who have osteoporosis have a very difficult time with osteoblasts, but the osteoclast never stops. We'll always continue to break down more bone as we age. So osteoporosis here, as we see, bone strength reflects integration of two main features, bone density and bone quality. The top picture on the left, as you can see, there is a picture of bone which has good density and good quality. Now the second picture below, as we see there, that's a bone that has lost a lot of bone mass, bone density, and is osteoporotic. Myself, as being an athlete and having shoulder surgery, when I had x-rays when I was inactive, in the x-ray you can see my humerus actually had lost a lot of bone mass compared to when I had been in the gym prior, or even after. When I came back and I was able to go to the gym and get back on the tennis court, I gained bone density again and bone mass. Now obviously though, this is bone that is very osteoporotic and looks like a bone of a person who has osteoporosis. Now some pathophysiology of osteoporosis. It's multifactorial, genetics. Something very interesting that I believe that I found and I wasn't aware of, and I don't believe many people are, is that adiposity affects the mechanisms of bone turnover. So adipose tissue can affect us. So this is why it's also important for proper nutrition and for weight management and for people to try to keep a healthy weight for their body composition. As I mentioned before, as with our age, it's harder to build new bone and more bone, but our bone cells continue to resorb bone and break down bone, which I talked about those two cells, osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Risk factors for osteoporosis. Some factors that predispose a person to osteoporosis are uncontrollable, as one that I mentioned before in the previous slide, which was genetics. Here we have a few more factors such as gender, age, body composition, and family history. Body composition is one though that actually can be uncontrollable and controllable, because we are born a certain way and with a certain body type. Some people are a little bit more big bone, tend to have bigger body compositions and size, but if they can try to keep a healthy weight for their size, that can prevent osteoporosis. Now if they're having issues as becoming obese, which can lead to diabetes and other diseases as such as osteoporosis, that could be an issue which should be controlled. Relevant and modifiable health risk factors. A major risk factor is lack of physical activity, particularly lack of weight-bearing, moderate to vigorous activity. Now in today's society, due to all of our technology such as social media, internet, computers, and video games, there's a big lack of physical activity. Even the World Health Organization has called a lack of physical activity to be a public health issue, a major one at this point. People who lack physical activity at this day in our society go from adults to young adults to even children. So it's very important for people to get out there and be physically active. Other modifiable risk factors include alcohol intake, cigarette smoking. As we learned throughout this course and our textbook, cigarette smoking has many negative implications. And even worse off is secondhand smoking. So trying to stay away from smoking and even secondhand smoke, which causes even more negative implications than cigarette smoking. It's very important. We have here sex hormones, and we also have medication use. Medication use can help prevent osteoporosis, but there's also some medications that have been proven to actually cause a person to be more susceptible to osteoporosis. Components of affected health. Osteoporosis can lead to anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Depression, why? Because once a person has osteoporosis, at this point, this affects their daily living, can affect their livelihood, their physical activity. So that in turn can make a person depressed. Also, obviously, here we have the interrelated components. Physical, definitely, once a person has fractures, they're most likely to be in pain and having their daily living activities really disabled by that, and so a lack of range of motion. So a lot of things going on. This can affect their mental and emotional aspect also. So they will be hindered. That's the word I wanted to use, was hindered. Current events. New medications are coming out. We have new medications here. We've had medications in the past. Some of them haven't been as positive, successful as we would have liked them to be. But as we see here in the second bullet point, the risk of a clinical fracture, such as an arm or leg fracture, was actually reduced by 27% by this specific medication. So that's something that's positive. Current testing. Our current testings consist of CT magnetic scans, ultrasounds, and the DEXA, which are currently used to detect osteoporosis. Detecting osteoporosis is very important. The earlier we can detect it and prevent bone loss, because it's very hard to recover bone. So it's easier to prevent than to recover bone loss. So, and the issue with osteoporosis is that it's silent and is asymptomatic, so it's very difficult to detect. Controversial topics. This one is very fond of this topic here of speaking about vegetarians. I myself am a vegetarian, so I thought this was interesting. I'm always hearing from family members and friends, oh, well, are you getting the proper nutrition and the nutrients, in your daily intake of foods? Do you feel healthy? Do you have energy? So this is something I wanted to look into. And as I research, it is a myth that vegetarians are more prone to osteoporosis. There's many vegetables that are high in calcium and vitamin D that could prevent a person being susceptible to osteoporosis. Anyone with improper nutrition or malnourished can be more susceptible, whether they're vegetarian or not, to osteoporosis. But yeah, the fact that a vegetarian is more susceptible to it is not true. So something I wanted to look into. The T-score is a controversial topic. The T-score is used to detect osteoporosis, and the way it is used is actually that a person takes a bone mineral density test, and then their value is going to be compared to that of a 30-year-old of the same sex or their same gender. Now we should ask the question, why? Why is it going to be compared to a 30-year-old? Well, the reason why it's going to be compared to a 30-year-old individual of the same gender is because at around the age of 30 is when a person has their highest peak bone mass. So that's why they do that. And so the T-score, the standard deviation after that of the person they get who's 30, will detect how low it is, if they have osteopenia or osteoporosis or severe osteoporosis, what stage they're at. New technology. We're lucky we live in a day and age where our technology is always advancing. We're always looking for new technology. In this disease, osteoporosis, if new technology can detect this disease early on, it would be great to prevent and help a person live a much healthier life. So some of the new technologies here we have is a biosensor. The biosensor actually is a device that's going to be measuring the serum known as the CTX1, which is in the blood. And this, I really fond of this study. If this could be detected early, it could prevent a lot of issues. New testing technology. As here we have new hormone therapy. There has been hormone therapies in the past, some actually which have had some controversy and actually have had some negative implications with women. But this new hormone therapy for the parathyroid is actually shown to be successful. Now we actually have something here that I found that it's just being tested out. I don't know how it's going to be used yet, if it's going to be used in the public or in a hospital setting or in a doctor setting, but it's a smart toilet, and what it has is a sensor array, and it's used as when a person goes to void their bowels. The sensor array is going to detect high bone turnover rates. So that's how it's going to be used. Then we have down here the proteome analysis, which measures proteins that can be indicative of bone turnover as well. So these are some new testing technologies. Cost of therapy. As we see here, cost of therapy can range on the severity of the stage that a person has osteoporosis. We don't know if the insurance will cover all these medications, so the cost can get costly. As you see here, one of them as the parathyroid hormone, which has shown to be successful, is actually very costly and very expensive, going over $8,000 annually. Signs of osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is very difficult to detect because, as I mentioned here, it is a silent disease, so a person does not really feel pain, or there's very few signs until a fracture occurs. Now, there are some signs, as in the sense of a person displaying kyphosis, a swollen abdomen, or if a person actually has a collapsed vertebrae. These all can be indicative of a person having osteoporosis. Prevention techniques. The most effective defense for osteoporosis is early detection, as I mentioned before, and prevention, since it's a silent disease. Obviously, it's very difficult though, because since it's silent, it's very hard to detect. Catching it early though will always be the best defense for osteoporosis. Preventing bone loss is more effective than recovering bone. It's very difficult to recover bone. There are treatments that do try to recover bone, but it's much more effective to prevent bone loss. Adequate calcium and vitamin D intake, weight-bearing exercises, jogging and walking in sports. This is very important to understand. Weight-bearing exercises help increase bone mass and actually help prevent loss of bone mass. Now, if you jog or like to walk, that is great, but you should know that when you're walking or jogging, although it's weight-bearing on the lower body, your upper body is not having any weight-bearing exercises. So you should add some resistance training or some form of physical activity that is weight-bearing also for the upper body, such as lifting weights, maybe resistance bands, body weight exercises that are push-ups, things like that, in order to increase and prevent bone loss. So although jogging and walking is great, remember when you're walking and jogging, the bone weight bearing exercise is only truly affecting the femur and the lower body bones, as the tibia and fibula also. So just be aware of that. That's something that we need to make the general public aware of. Prevention techniques. Keep away from smoking, alcohol consumption. As I mentioned before, that adipose tissue can cause issues with the mechanisms of bone turnover. So can anorexia nervosa. So it seems that body composition is very important to keep adequate weight and proper nutrition. Healthy diet and proper nutrition will help maintain homeostasis with body weight in order to stay away from becoming anorexic or obese. Both these show to be affecting bone remodeling issues. Treatment. Nutrition is very important for treatment, as I mentioned. So is exercise. Exercise is great to make a person stay physically active, helps maintain their weight, helps maintain their bone mass. And as I mentioned, coordination, strength, and balance, all this leads to better overall health. But it's so important, exercise, and if it could be resistance training, add some resistance training in there, like I mentioned before, as in maybe some weight training or body weight exercises. Medications are available for prevention and treatment of osteoporosis. As I mentioned, but they're there both for prevention and treatment. But there has been, like I said, until recently, some new therapy, some new hormone therapy that have shown positive. Not everyone can take the same hormonal therapy, especially with women. It's shown that women react differently to different hormone therapies, so that's something to keep in mind. Alternatives: prevention rather than treatment. Always with osteoporosis, the best way to fight it is to catch it early and try to prevent it. I put in here yoga, most people don't think of yoga as a strength exercise or a weight bearing exercise, but the reason why I put yoga is just to mention that any person should try to find a physical activity or exercise that they're fond of, that they like to, that is geared towards them, that they enjoy, which can also help them prevent osteoporosis. Yoga is good soothing. It's soothing for the mind, the spirit, relaxation, and also does have weight bearing positions and can be intense and also used for strength. Now, another alternative to use the new forms of technology, such as these patches, monitors for early detection of osteoporosis. This is great. We should continue in this direction, trying to get these new forms of patches to catch osteoporosis early. That would be great. Application to public health in osteoporosis. So by 2020, 1 in 2 Americans greater than the age of 50 will be at risk for fractures from osteoporosis. Currently, people get assessed after they've had a fracture, having symptoms of pain, for which then scans are used to examine the level of osteoporosis. So I mentioned most people don't even know that they are carrying this disease of osteoporosis until they have a fracture. Which at that point, once they have the fracture, they're at a greater stage and they're no longer in the preventive stage. So it'd be great to use these new markers, as I mentioned, those new technologies, staying active in order to prevent having these fractures, because once this happens, the person already is at an osteoporotic stage, which is more difficult. 54 million Americans have low bone mass or osteoporosis. That's a very high number. I believe that could change also with people being and becoming more physically active. Issues with osteoporosis. The number one thing with osteoporosis that there's an issue with is detecting it. That is asymptomatic. That is very hard to detect. Most people don't even know that they have it or are carrying this disease until they have that fracture. Taking in vitamin D. Also in the United States, especially during the winter months, there's some states do not have a lot of sun, which that can people might be deficient in vitamin D. So trying to get that vitamin D, even being outside for a while, just 10 minutes, they can help you with that, or trying to intake the vitamin D. That would definitely will help. To have making sure to exercise. You're not at people that are not exercising more than 2 hours per week. That's not great. You need to continue doing these weight bearing exercises, taking the proper nutrition, the proper vitamins. Oh, one last issue I didn't want to mention osteoporosis is most people think that it's only about women, postmenopausal women, that are susceptible to osteoporosis, and that is not the fact. Young adults can be susceptible to osteoporosis, and men also actually very susceptible to osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a serious public health problem. It affects 10.2 million Americans, 2 million fractures yearly, and it is becoming a huge cost issue, almost 18 billion. So this is why it's so important to reduce and catch osteoporosis early, which can prevent the cost, can prevent fractures, and can help people stay overall healthy. Recommendations for osteoporosis. Here I have some recommendations. Vitamins, taking vitamins, making sure that people have the proper nutrition, making sure they intake vitamin D and calcium. just making sure that they exercise, staying active, weight bearing exercise, finding the right exercise that suits their liking and what they can enjoy. It doesn't have to be that they have to go to the gym 5 times a week. They can maybe go walking, get that lower body weight bearing exercise going on. Maybe some also, maybe they like to be out in the ocean and row. That could be some upper body resistance training right there. So just finding something to do that can help increase that bone mineral density and bone mass, or maintain it. Being exposed to sunlight, as I mentioned before, getting that sunlight helps you keep naturally that vitamin D. Get that vitamin D. When you take your vitamins, making sure also to try to combine them. If you can combine zinc with vitamin C, that helps with absorption, to intake the zinc better. Calcium with vitamin D. So sometimes mixing these vitamins can help your body absorb it better and retain it. And that's basically what I have for osteoporosis. It's a very difficult disease to detect, and catch it early is the best prevention. Can't stress that enough. It was very interesting for me to find out that obesity was linked to osteoporosis, and so was anorexia nervosa, just being underweight. Also another fun fact was, it says that women I found that were under the weight of 127 pounds have a high potential of becoming and having osteoporosis in the future. So it shows that body composition, as controlling that body weight, as we mentioned before, trying to have a healthy weight is very important. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.